Me anything about politics. This is the show where you can ask anything that you like about politics, and no one's going to judge you, no one's going to roast you, no one's going to make fun of you. So, any questions about politics, just go ahead and throw them in the chat, and we will get to answering them. I know that politics can be really intimidating when you're first trying to learn about it. I know it can feel like trying to learn the language. So, this is the show where you can ask all your questions. You don't got to worry about anybody judging you or roasting you or anything like that. Everybody is welcome here, whether you are a Republican, a Democrat, something in the middle, something on the outskirts. I don't believe in fighting or debating or roasting. It is just good faith answers to all of your good faith questions. There's a lot of misinformation and propaganda bouncing around out there willy nilly. So, this is the show where you can ask all your questions so that we can have a better understanding of what actually is going on in the world and in our country and in our government. What's up, all Foyds? Doing okay? Hope you're doing good as well. What's up, JP? Good to see you. So, yeah, any questions, just throw them in the chat and we'll get to answering them. Everybody is welcome here, whether you are a Republican, a Democrat, something in the middle, something on the outskirts. I know there's a lot of really popular shows out there where Democrats and Republicans just yell at each other. This is not that show. This is just good faith answers to all of your good faith questions. I don't believe in fighting or debating or harassing or bullying. So you can ask all your questions here without any kind of fear that you're going to get roasted or made fun of, And if you want a show where there's fighting, there's tons of those shows. You don't have to hang out here. What's up, Willie? Great to see you again. So yeah, throw your questions about politics in the chat. I know politics can be really intimidating when you're first trying to learn about it. I know it can feel like trying to learn a new language because there's all this misinformation and propaganda that's running around rampant out there. What was I about to say? Okay. All right. Ohms de Nieges says thoughts on Marxism. I can vibe with some of the shit in Marxism, like workers having more power and a larger share of the profits that they create. Martin Flatbread says, when does the comedy start? We don't do comedy on this live stream necessarily. Sometimes we do funny things, but it is mostly just sober and sincere answers to all of your questions about politics. John Bradley says, what do you think the solution for Iran is now that the genie is out of the bottle? It's a really good question, John Bradley. If we were to just sort of like magically replace everybody in the Trump administration with people that were good at their jobs, I believe that stopping all sort of like aggression against Iran, using our leverage against Israel to stop them doing attacks on Palestine and Lebanon and Iran, that's probably step one. But going back to some sort of arrangement like we had with the Iran nuclear deal under Obama that Trump threw in the garbage for no fucking reason, that would be a nice place to start. I think Iran, after Trump threw the first JCPOA in the garbage, has been playing hardball with signing something new because they got backstabbed by America a couple of times. But, I think that we need to take our lumps. I think that we need to make it a less equal arrangement with Iran because we fucked them over and we are we are the party that is in the wrong in that situation. Max D says, is the Supreme Court too political? This version of the Supreme Court is 100% too political. And that is thanks to the Republican Party. You can thank Republicans for that. Martin Flappert says, are you American? How was your spray can cheese and XXL soda today? I am American. I don't fuck with that shit, though. Mateo says, I can't take it anymore. Yes, you can, Mateo. You're stronger than you realize. Ooh, ready. Torment says, no one in the history of the world has reached 60% uranium enrichment and hasn't developed nukes. Okay, Torment. Well, it's the first time for everything. How much enrichment do you need if you just want to have a nuclear power plant, Torment? Do you know the answer to that? Let me know. Alrighty, excellent question so far. Savage says gas and electric companies shouldn't be privatized and should. I would love to hear the end of that statement, Savage, because I generally agree with that. Yeah, anything where you need to lay like fiber optic cables and shit, like it's very difficult for there to be real competition in that situation. Bob Borden says, another girly man. Oh, what tipped you off? Was it my deep voice, my luscious beard, my my legendary sexual prowess? Martin Flatbread says, what about your donut for breakfast and questionable gun laws? You know, Martin Flatbread, I see what you're doing here, and I don't disagree with you at all. Like, these are all fair hits on America in general. Ayo JJR says, best political party in the UK? Probably one of the left-leaning parties like Labour or Greens. AV8 says, what do liberals do for 4th of July? Same thing that everybody else does, you know, hot dogs and hamburgers and hanging out with friends and family and maybe seeing some fireworks or a drone show, AV8 liberals, they're just regular people. You know, we user a whole bunch of numbers says, can Republicans savage the midterms? They will try, but I do not believe they will be successful. It is up to us to stop them from trying to steal the midterms. Torment says the most common commercial power plants require 3 to 5% enrichment. Okay, well, the reason why Iran got to 60% is because they did not want America to attack them. And America doesn't attack countries that have nuclear weapons. Martin Flatbread says, good sport, donuts for breakfast, and affordable health care is a wild combo too. No arguments here, Martin Flatbread. Ayo JJR says, you guys are so lucky to have a leader like Trump when we are stuck with Starmer. I feel like that's a nonsense take. Ayo, you're in question jail. Ask a question or I'm going to boot you. Aloof says, is food political? It shouldn't, but it kind of is, the way that the culture war has made everything political. John Marco Ceresi has a really funny bit about that, where he's like, I wanted to get a salad. And my friend was like, we should be able to get a salad around here. It's a pretty liberal area. And it's like, it is weird that food has become political. Like when me and my friends saw those like trans bathroom bills happening in the South, we were like, dude, we got to go down there and get some barbecue because I'm sure it fucking kicks ass. AOJJR says, you are going to boot me for having an opinion. Classic lefty. That's not what I said, but you've annoyed me, so you're out of here. AV8 says, I'm more of a Democrat than Joe Biden, and I voted for Trump. Today's Democrats are not true Democrats. That is inaccurate. AV8, ask a question or you're out of here. Timothy says, I'd bet anything you're a Democrat. I'd bet anything you're Republican because your spelling is bad. Scatterbrain says, would you agree that most politicians' hands are tied by billionaire and elitist interests? Yes, but I would not say most. I would say a lot of, and I would say that the platform of the Republican Party made that be the case, whereas the platform of the Democratic Party is trying to undo that. John Bradley says, did you see UAB is considering making a canal to bypass the Hormuz Strait? I didn't see that. I saw that, like, who was it? Newt Gingrich was talking about doing that or something, which I don't know how viable of a solution that is. Irving Abraham says 1979 U.S. Embassy in Tehran was taking U.S. sovereignty international law, consider the act of war. Back in 1979, it's not really an imminent threat now, is it? Gogo says, do you support Iran or the USA? I support the citizens of both of those countries. I am against the governments of both of those countries. Scatterbrain says, I think that politics are actually a ruse for us rubes. Politics is not a ruse for rubes. Politics is how we choose our leaders. Politics is how we establish the laws and regulations that oversee us and the billionaires that rule over us. So no, politics is not a ruse. There are people alive today because people vote for Democrats. There are people who are dead today because people voted for Republicans. Happy to go into more detail on that if you like. BC Cured Backyard Pike says, thoughts on anarcho-communism? I don't know what it is. Scatterbrain says, you have a lot of trust and faith in politics. No, I don't. I have trust and faith that if we do the work, we can have a better country and world. Felly says, do you think communism can actually work in reality? It already is working in reality. Every employee-owned company is essentially communist. All right. Martin Flatbread says, I think calling a man girl-looking is an admission of attraction. Ooh, Martin Flatbread. Taking shots at whoever called me a girl above. Jago Vargas says, are we cooked already? I'd say we're medium well, but I definitely don't think that we are fully cooked. ATM. Okay, let's see here. Asgan PK says, does Iran pose a threat to the American homeland? I think it can. I don't think that it was before Trump attacked them. Kia Girl says, working the election, Illinois, get out the vote. Oh, I'm so happy to hear that, Kia Girl. Gogo says, why did every communist country collapse or it's bad living there? There's never been a communist country. Every country that has called themselves communist has been a dictatorship, and dictatorships are antithetical to communism. Backyard Poke says, you read any Karl Marx? Yeah, I mean, I read the Communist Manifesto. Dr. Benstone says, is there a scenario U.S. can win in Iran? Potentially. I do not trust the Trump administration to actually do that. That's the kind of thing you need to plan, and this administration did not plan. They didn't plan. So, Iraq and Afghanistan were quagmires that were way better plans than this. This is going to be a catastrophe. Mick says Trump said that he can take Cuba. Thoughts? I don't know what Trump's timeline is for any kind of incursion into Cuba. I think he probably is feeling a little sensitive from how poorly Iran is going. I think he's trying to back out of it. I think that he'll probably move away from military incursions depending on how Iran continues going forward. But it speaks to a larger entitlement that Trump has, thinking that he is an all-powerful emperor who doesn't have to abide by any rules, who does not care about civilian casualties or the effect that his actions have on anybody who isn't himself. Robbie Wood says, how do people still support Republicans? Misinformation and propaganda, my guy. It's a hell of a drug. Okay. Ben X Murder says, what mental disorders do you think Trump has? Probably like antisocial personality disorder or narcissistic personality disorder, something like that. D says, but didn't the Iranians' reason to dislike us begin in the early 1950s, not 1979? I don't have that history like in my noodle. D, but I believe that is accurate. I believe that we started fucking with Iran long before they started fucking with us. K. Laban says, what political wing are you? I'm a progressive Democrat. Case M says, 3 words you just said pretty much tell the entire story about you. I don't know. Kasem, I actually agree. I think that more people that talk about politics should emphasize the things that they do and do not know. So thank you for the compliment. It is the wise man who admits he knows nothing, Kasem. And anybody that does not ever say I don't know in relation to things, you should treat with a bunch of skepticism. Mo Al-Safar says politics are dirty. Doesn't have to be. Diego Vargas says the U.S. had a good relationship with Iran prior to the Ayatollah. Oh, that's interesting. I didn't know that. Gogo says I think communism can't be used without creating an authoritarian state that owns everything. Well, it depends on how you define communism. I define communism as workers own the means of production. So just having employee-owned companies can be communism. Laws that say that the lowest paid employees should have seats on the board could technically be described as communism. And I think that we should be moving in that direction instead of shadow boxing potential totalitarian communist governments. Like America is not even close to having that, but we could have more employee-owned companies. We could have a law that says the CEO can't make more than 50 times what his lowest paid employees make. We could have a law that says that half the seats on a board need to be allocated to the lowest paid employees, shit like that. Kaylaban says, what's your opinion on ICE? ICE is a rogue agency that has been brutally and illegally kidnapping people, regardless of their citizenship status or whether or not they've committed any crimes. They have been holding people in detention illegally. They have been murdering people and sexually assaulting people and torturing people. I kind of did that in reverse order of severity, but you get my meaning. They need to be abolished without question. Diego Vargas says we had an embassy in Iran and Reagan used the hostages as political advantage to beat Jimmy Carter. Oh yeah, he's a piece of shit. What are you gonna do? Mo Al-Safar says yes, it is and will always be. It will create a strife between people. Inaccurate. Mo Al-Safar, we can do politics better. We just have to be the change that we want to see in the world. Jay City says, why do Dems keep running on unity and bipartisanship with Republicans who are just effing evil? So a couple of things about that, Jay City. I want to make sure that we are talking about politicians and thought leaders as opposed to voters, because I do still believe in unity and bipartisanship with other voters. It is just the Republican Party and all of their, excuse me, psychotic talking heads like Ben Shapiro that are the ones that are effing evil. And I don't believe that Democrats are running on that. I do not believe that Democrats are trying to, form a coalition with, Ted Cruz and shit like that. But they are trying to say that we can govern for all of America, not just other Democratic voters. Let me know what you think about that. Mama Deb says he cut off any assistance to Cuba was getting from China and Venezuela, thus starving the people. That is accurate. Brando says thoughts on Joe Kent resigning. I am extremely worried about that. Joe Kent, if anybody does not know, is worked in counterterrorism or counterintelligence, I forget, and just resigned because he believes that Iran is a really bad thing. My take on that is that he does not want to be held accountable for any domestic terrorist attacks that happen, and that's the reason why he dipped. Counterterrorism, yeah, counterterrorism. What does it tell you that former CIA Joe Kent is resigning from his position in counterterrorism? He is not being given the resources to prevent terrorist attacks from happening on American soil. And so he does not want to be blamed for anything that happens, so he's resigned. Laban says, thoughts on the Israel-Palestine war. I believe that the governing bodies of both Israel and the West Bank and Gaza have been doing bad things, war crimes, genocide, etc. Because Israel is the more powerful party in that conflict, I believe it is incumbent upon them to begin the work of establishing peace. But because the government of Israel is currently under control of Netanyahu, who's a far-right extremist, in coalition with even more extreme extremists, he is never going to do that. And so the people of Israel need to replace their government with people who will actually do the work of creating peace in that region instead of trying to fucking annex all of their neighboring countries. Sorry for tomorrow. Great to see you again. Says, I don't know. Want to push a false narrative, but do you think a false flag is more likely than an actual terrorist attack? I would not put it past the Trump administration to do something like that. I have not seen any evidence that that is something that they are planning, but where any domestic terrorist action occurs that, can be associated with Iran, I believe that the American people should blame Donald Trump, whether it was a false flag operation or not, because this was a war of choice, poorly planned, irresponsibly deployed, not sold to the American people, not given authorization by Congress, illegal, stupid, irresponsible. Anything that happens on American soil is his fault. Anything that happens to American service members who are abroad is his fault. Anything happening to American citizens in the Middle East right now is his fault because he did not go as far as to plan how to get those people out once the fucking war started, that he had complete control over when it started. Alrighty, let's see here. Tumba Ecuadorian says, if that is the case, why is sharing bad? Ecuadorian says, why is sharing bad? Are you talking about? I think you're probably arguing to the person who is what do you call it? The person who was arguing against communism, right? Ecuadorian. I think that's probably what's up. Oh no! Okay, submit an appeal. Okay, so I was just booted off of TikTok for the next 3 days for misinformation, which is bullshit, of course. And that is what always happens to me during my live streams. I sent the appeal. I usually win the appeals, so I'm not too pressed about it. But yeah, it's just annoying. It's annoying. It's annoying that this keeps on happening. So yeah, anybody over on Twitch and YouTube, now is the time to ask your questions. Because if I do not have my TikTok to be able to do my questions on, then I don't have all that much to say. Because I don't have as many people watching who are not on TikTok, So let me know. Welcome everybody to Ask Me Anything About Politics. My name is Jared, and I answer your questions about politics, be they simple or complicated. Okay. Thank you, Ecuadorian. I appreciate that. What's up, Muzz King? Thank you for that. Oh, hey, Muzz King is over there. Yeah, still suspended. Still waiting on my appeal to see how that goes. All right, let's see here. All right, just gotta keep on checking and rechecking to see if I've been let back on. You know. Mm, Oh no. What's that? So yeah, any oh here we go. Ecuadorian says my TikTok can go live. I hardly use my backup. You can use it if you want. I don't really need it for anything. Yeah, I don't know if that would really solve the problem. Tumboco Ecuadorian. But I appreciate the offer, But to anybody else who's watching, this is Ask Me Anything About Politics. I'm here to answer your questions about politics, be they simple or complicated. So just go ahead and throw your questions in the chat, and we will get to answering them. Ecuadorian says it solves the problem. I push TikTok for my own personal amusement. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know if my fans would know to go there. Yeah, I usually win these appeals, so I can just go ahead and get back on usually. But we just gotta wait and see how my appeal goes. And I think we're back. I think we're back. And we're back on TikTok. Another right-wing person reporting me for misinformation completely erroneously. What a world we are living in. What a world where shit like this can occur. All right, welcome everybody to Ask Me Anything About Politics. My name is Jared, and I answer all your questions about politics, be they simple or complicated. I know that politics can be really intimidating when you're first trying to learn about it. I know it can feel like trying to learn a new language. So, this is the show where you can ask all of your questions about politics, and no one's going to judge you, no one's going to roast you, no one's going to bait you. Blaze, I almost never have people come on the live stream, but if you really want to come on, then stick around, ask a couple of good faith questions, then we'll see what happens. To everybody else, this is Ask Me Anything About Politics. Muzz King, Aaron Gregory, thank you so much for helping me reach my first gift goal of the day. I answer questions about politics, everybody, so you can just throw your questions in the chat and we will get to answering them. Everybody is welcome here, whether you are a Republican, a Democrat, something in the middle, and something on the outskirts. This is not a show for fighting or harassment or bullying. Blaze says, why is communism bad and could it work if we didn't have a totalitarian government? So it really depends on how you define communism. The there are bad faith actors out there who will define communism in a way to make it seem like any attempt at giving workers more power in their companies or in the government is a bad thing because it would be quote unquote communism. I think the best way to do communism is to first try a more Scandinavian model for our economy, meaning a little bit more socialism, a little bit more communism, a little less straight up crony capitalism, like we currently have here in America. And, depending on how that works, maybe we can see. Maybe we can see about going a little bit further down there. MSS says, who should be our next president? Oh, first of all, we got midterms happening in 26. We got elections happening this year. We got primaries happening this year. And we got a general election happening in November that the Democrats need to sweep. Otherwise, we're fucked. So everybody get out there and do the work to win the midterms for the Democratic Party in 26. After that, I like Chris Murphy for president. Blaze says, I feel like I just want my taxes to help people, free healthcare, free schooling, etc. I am a socialist. I agree with all of those policies that you have there, Blaze. And yeah, they're going to be people who tell you that being a socialist is, totalitarian or a dictatorship, or it's anti-American because it's anti-capitalist, or you can't have private ownership of anything. The government's going to own it, blah, blah, blah. So if I were you, I would not use the word socialist because there's a lot of people who don't a lot of people who have different definitions of that word, they're going to tell you, oh, she want America to be just like Venezuela. I would just say what you said above. I want my taxes to help people, free healthcare, free schooling, etc. Ed Marshall says communism can only work in a voluntary situation. I don't necessarily agree with that. I think that if we had a law saying that employees need to be represented on boards of directors, I think that would be fine. I think that if we had tax incentives to incentivize companies to be employee owned, I think that would be great. That doesn't have to be voluntary. That could be a law. Sora says, is ice bad? Yes, 100% without question. I can go into more detail if you like, Sora. High Voltage says, do you think Talarico's chances are in Texas? I think he's got great chance. I think the Democrats are poised to do great in the midterms, failing any, Republican malfeasance or voter suppression. And I think Pete Hegseth is not Hegseth. I think James Talarico is a great candidate for Texas. Dan, Gen X says socialism and communism have no place in America. Socialism and communism already exists in America, Dan, Jen, and is already doing great. Would you like me to go into more detail, Dan? Let me know. Person whose name I can't read says, who do you think has stricter immigration policies, Democrats or Republicans? Republicans do, but they're stricter without actually solving the problem. They are not solving the problem. They are just making it worse. Sebastian says, do you condemn the Israeli aggression on Iran? Yes, 100%. Ed Marshall says, law removing company ownership is not voluntary. Okay, and that would work, in my opinion. Dan, Gen X says, look what the Democrats are doing to Virginia. They're screwing it over. I have not seen any reporting to suggest that, Dan, Gen X. It seems like Virginia's doing pretty good to me. Cam, 2010 says, do you support Scottish independence? If that's what Scottish people want, then yeah, sure, why the hell? Dan Gen X says, yes, going to detail if you would. Sure. What was the thing I said? All right, so yeah, socialism is basically when we use our tax dollars to pay for things that help everybody. So paved roads, public schools, fire department, military, police, all of that is socialism. I'm just saying that we could use socialism in things like healthcare and education and housing, because those are places where the private market has failed. They have become so prohibitively expensive that people are now dying on the street, not being able to go to college, not being able to get healthcare. So we could have a little more socialism that way, in my opinion. Communism is just when workers own the means of production. So any employee-owned company is essentially communist. And again, those companies do amazing. So I think that we should have more of that. I do the Yell says, why do we still have the Electoral College? Because the Republican Party doesn't want to give up the extra power that it gives to them. Sebastian says, that's not socialism. I mean, that's one way of defining socialism. Ed Marshall says, no, that's communism. Guys, here's the thing. Nobody's going to agree on what your definition of communism is. I'm saying this is what I view of as communism and socialism, and that's the thing that I want more of in this country. If you have a different definition of socialism, then I don't want what you think that is. Sebastian says, have you read Marx? Yes, I read the Communist Manifesto, and I did a little bit more when I was in college. Thor says, Adolf did all of that. I do not think that is accurate. Thor, ask a question or you're out of here. Dan Gen X says, you understand you're not entitled to somebody else's money or success. Okay, well then how come rich people have taken all of our money and success? Why are rich people allowed to steal the productivity of the working class? Where without the workers, their companies would not exist. They are able to take 99% of the gains of everything that a worker does. That's the stealing, Dan. That is the stealing that you're talking about. Dan Jen says, they haven't taken your money success. They actually know how to work and actually invest. That is wildly inaccurate, Dan, Jen. That is wildly inaccurate. Congratulations, Dan. You're in question jail. If you don't ask a question, I'm going to boot you. Dan Gen X says, you understand that an employee has no blood in the game, no skin. I do understand that, but that is actually not true at all. Their skin in the game is being able to survive. Dan, Jen. Matthew Arc 1 says, you sound jealous. Somebody once said, when I called for taxing the rich when I was poor, they said I was jealous. When I called for taxing the rich when I was rich, they said I was a hypocrite. It seems like they just don't want to tax the rich. So you can miss me with that nonsense, Matthew. Robert Saleh says, because fair workers continue to work. I don't know what that means. Kuba I am says, your definition of socialism is incorrect. I don't care if you think it is. That's what the definition that I think is the most accurate. Ashton Morum says, spread the means of production as far as possible. I don't know what that means, but I do believe that we should give workers the means of production. Dan Jen says, so they get no right to the reward of what that company gets, they're paid well. So they get no right to the reward of what that company gets, they're paid well. They're not being paid well, Dan Jen. They are not being paid well. if people are dying on the street because they can't afford healthcare and they can't afford housing, they can't afford college, and they can't afford food, while the owners of the companies that they work for are flying around in private jets, eating lobster and caviar 3 meals a day, then no, they are not being paid what they have earned. Dan, you were in question jail. Ask a question or you're out of here. Sebastian says, opinion on Lenin. I know almost nothing about him. Ashton Moru says, I like a lot more small businesses than big. I don't know where that is. John 868 says, are you rich? It depends on who you ask. Compared to most poor people, I am rich. Compared to Jeff Bezos, I am poor. Bra says, thoughts on communism. Ooh, that sounds like a consomme that we all share. Yeah, workers under the means of production, I'm for it. Dan says, do you know Psychot? Not personally, but I have been supporting his campaign for a really long time. Shark says, dedicating decades of your life to a company equals student of the game. Completely agree with that. All right, let's see here. Dan Blackwood says, I think we should show billionaires a surprise party. I agree with that. Dan Gen X says, have you ever lived in a communist country? There has never been a communist country, Dan Gen. Every country that has ever called itself communist has been a dictatorship. The ideologies are antithetical. You cannot have a communist dictatorship. Dan Blackwood says Costco is a profitable business that engage in profit sharing with its employees and they pay well. That is accurate. JJJ says, what are some things that Trump is doing that you like? I refuse to answer that question, JJJ, and I'll tell you why. When somebody is doing as many terrible things as Trump is doing, why is it my job to find the good things? Why is it my job? If somebody stabs me in the throat, do I have to be like, well, they have nice eyes, I guess? That is a false sort of like dichotomy. It is a premise that I cannot have any objective value unless I admit to the things that Trump has done that I liked. And I find that to be a propaganda technique. Jeremy Rudge says, so you just refuse to see any good. That's not true. Ashton says, that's what I mean by spreading the means of production far as possible. Small businesses over big. Oh, I like that. Matthew says, are you anti-American? Sounds like it. I'm not anti-American. Oscar says, thoughts on effective altruism. I don't know what that means. Is that where rich people do the work of taking care of everybody? Dan says, I think communism is perfect in theory, but cannot work in real life. It is already currently working in real life, Dan. Any employee-owned company is communism. Bra says, a true nothing has ever exist, though? Question mark. I don't know what that means. DMAC3 says, restore Britain? Question mark. I'm a lefty, so no. Dan says, aspects of communism, though, can benefit the United States. It can and currently is, Dan. Scrolling up, scrolling up, scrolling up, scrolling up, scrolling up, scrolling up, scrolling up. Sebastian says, you just said you know nothing about Lenin and now you call the USSR a dictatorship. I mean, it was. Let's see here. Ram says, do you support the Islamist regime? No, I do not. El Toro Perro Loco says, what do you think about the counterterrorism czar resigning? To me, that looks like a guy, and I don't have any, I haven't seen any reporting to confirm this or not. But it seems to me that if you are the head of counterterrorism during the Trump administration, when they are waging a war against Iran, and you do not believe that you are being given the resources to prevent a domestic terrorist attack, then you resign. That is what I think has occurred. I think that he does not want to get blamed for a domestic terrorist event, and so he is resigning. All right, Stefan says overcorrection could cause businesses to close and cause more issues. I don't believe that we'll even ever get close to that, Stefan. Alrighty, let's see here. Somebody whose name I can't read says, why are Democratic politicians so bad at their jobs? They're not. They're really good at them. Would you like me to give you examples of Democrats being really good at their jobs? Giorgio says, do you think returning to newspapers over social media might lower tensions between parties? Potentially. Yeah, I mean, a large driver of divisiveness is social media algorithms, and also the fact that they are owned by the billionaire class who want us fighting amongst ourselves. Sebastian says, do you condemn Hillary Clinton, Obama, NATO attacks on Libya? I am all for criticizing all of those people. I do not know enough about the attacks on Libya to speak about it. Real says, do you support Israel or Palestine? I support the civilians of both of those countries. I'm against the governments of both of those countries. Ashton Moru says, Kennedy was a good Democrat. I think that's largely accurate. What is up, Lauren? Great to see you again. Turd Ferguson says, When were newspapers not owned by the wealthy? LOL. I mean, there's different versions of the wealthy, Turd Ferguson. There is billionaires who own national papers and rule them with an iron fist with no journalistic integrity. And then there are local papers owned by a guy who has $100,000. Cflon says the Mamdani situation shows it sounds good in theory, but never works out that way. I find that to be wildly inaccurate, Cflon. Things are going great in New York because of Mamdani, and I worry about where you're getting your news if you think that Mamdani is fucking up New York when I have only heard amazing things about what he's been doing. Ram says, what Republican would you be okay with winning the presidency in 2028? None. Not a single fucking one. Every single one of them is continuing to vote to send money and weapons to Israel. Every single one of them is continuing to vote to cut taxes for the rich and cut services that everybody needs. There is not a single Republican that I trust over any Democrat, with the exception of like Kristen Sinema or Joe Manchin or John Fetterman. Mad says, do you think ICE would be an okay idea if there were more training and control over it? Yeah, sure. But that is not what's happened. And it hasn't been that way for a really long time. My name is Lee says, great in New York. They are trying to have a 50% death tax. Oh my God, we're bringing back the death tax. Oh my God, the death tax. That is some classic right-wing spin right there, guys. Yeah, it's called the inheritance tax. It is taxing rich, entitled, spoiled children who were born with a gold spoon in their mouth, that they can't just take everything that their parents earned by exploiting the working class. Cvlon says he ran on tax the rich, but now is going to have to raise taxes on the middle class. That is inaccurate, Cvlon. He has threatened to raise property taxes in order to pressure the governor of New York to raise taxes on the wealthy. Dan says, is your top 3 issues right now Israel tax cuts and social programs? I don't know if I would say that, Dan. Skippy says, we have death tax in New Jersey. I mean, it's an estate tax. It's inheritance tax. Ram says, do you support America sending money and weapons to Ukraine? Yes, I do. User a whole bunch of names says, in New York, I am Millie Rock. That's not a question. Dopest Ghost says, his eyes says he's a liberal, not a leftist. I don't think that that's an accurate thing. Skippy says, you're clueless. That's not a question. Matt says, yes, I agree. If IS agents were trained like officers and wore body cams, I think it would be better. I think we need more than that. I think that there's rot in ICE from the top down. It has got to be, I don't even think there's good bones in there anymore. I think it needs to be raised. And then if we need some people to do that job, then we start over from scratch. But there is rot in ICE and CPB. Dan says, what's wrong with the death tax? Death tax is right-wing spin. They were trying to make it sound like scary, like when your dad dies, the government's going to take everything that he has and leaving you poor and penniless. But really, it is an inheritance tax, meaning that the children of wealthy assholes don't get to have all of the money that their daddy made for them. Scott Clower says, Republicans rebranding death tax to make sound worse. Accurate. Sorry for tomorrow. So supporting Ukraine is only a positive. Supporting Israel is only a negative. I generally agree with that. Cflon says, so if Hochul doesn't do it, then the taxes would go up, correct? Not necessarily, Cflon. It is a possibility. But the Adams administration left Mamdani with a billions of dollars deficit, and I believe he's halved that already, which is extremely impressive. So, let's give him some props, Cflon. If you want me to send you some information about this, Cflon, I'm happy to do it. But I don't have everything memorized regarding what Mamdani has and has not done so far. Ooh, ready. Let's see here. My name is Lisa. So if the government did not bend the knee to Mamdani, then he would essentially, again, not necessarily true. Somebody whose name I can't read says, what do you think about Iran having nuclear weapons? I'm against everybody having nuclear weapons. We should completely denuclearize the whole world. Abdul says, right, the most war and recession happening during Republican government? ? I don't know what that question means. All right, scrolling down the bottom, Abdul says, why do the most wars and recessions happen during Republican governments? Because Republicans are really, really, really bad at governing. Triplet says, do you have a political degree? What is your expertise? I do not have a political degree. I just know a lot about it because I read a lot about it. Sebastian says, why don't you support the Palestinians resisting genocide? I do, Sebastian. I think it's weird that you would think that I don't, considering how many times I have said that I do. Right, John Abbott over on YouTube says Jonathan Ross was the guy who gives the training. If he needs more training, then the entire organization needs to be fired and replaced. Completely agree with that. Jack P44 says, who'd you vote for the 2024 election? Democrats up and down the ballot. Triplet says, so that makes you an expert. No, knowing a lot makes me an expert. Brody says, thoughts on immigration in the UK. Immigrants are a net positive everywhere. Sebastian says, you condemn the groups that do armed resistance. That doesn't make any sense, Sebastian. Right. That Romanian guy says, do you support China or Taiwan? Probably if I had to pick, I would go Taiwan. But I support the citizens of both of those countries. My name is Lee says, do you know about the gas tax on the ballot in California? If so, what are your thoughts on it? I need to read a little bit more about that. My name is Lee. If you shoot me a DM, I will happily dig into it. What's up, King of Darkness? Brody says, how about illegal immigration? Illegal immigration is obviously an issue, but whether somebody comes here illegally or not, whether they overstay their welcome or not, they will be a net positive on this country. The issue is people that come to the country and then break laws and are bad for the country, in which case those people should be deported, thrown in jail, whatever punitive, measures you deem appropriate. But because somebody messed up their paperwork or they haven't filed on time or whatever, that does not mean that they are a bad person or not a positive for the country that they are immigrating to. The Truth Teller, what's up? Good to see you again. That Romanian guy says, do you think Reagan should take the blame for the current economic situation in the U.S.? I think he's significantly responsible, but the billionaire class is also responsible. Like before Reagan, the billionaire class was starting to try to hack America's politics. Read Dark Money by Jane Mayer. Take a shot. Skippy says, immigration isn't just paperwork. I mean, mostly it is, Skippy. Can you tell me another thing that it is? My name is Lee. Says, I may disagree with some of your points, but I respect your honesty. I appreciate you. My name is Lee. Should be a DM. Let's chat about it. Rose Toy says, are you or a loved one currently using a Rose toy in your home? That seems like a plug for your toys, Rose Toys. Don't do that in my live stream. Come on. The Rebellion says, what up, bro? Have you looked into the Epstein files? What are your thoughts? There's a lot of information and misinformation out there concerning what has and has not been released in the Epstein files. Some of that misinformation is coming from the Trump administration itself, which is obviously not something that we want to happen. We do not want the government to be engaged in a cover-up of one of the most prolific child sex traffickers in American history. We don't want them doing this cover-up, to protect Trump and his buddies. Chili Willie and Muzking, thank you so much for helping me reach my second gift goal of the day. But yeah, I only wish for accountability for all of the people who were involved with Epstein and all of his PDF activities. Dan says, are you against Hamas? Yes, Hamas is a terrorist organization. They're guilty of war crimes. I am against them. Fog of War Productions says, I think Reagan has either been overloved or overhated, complicated legacy. Fog of War, I think I generally agree with that. I don't think he's been overhated, though. I think there are people who overstate his responsibility, but I do not think that anybody hates him too much. Okay. Truth Teller says, do you think Chad Bianco is any good? No, I like Katie Porter for governor of California. Alrighty, scrolling down to the bottom of the TikTok comments. That Romanian guy says, would you choose Obama or Kennedy? Oh, I don't know. They both seem pretty okay to me. Era says, stance on Israel. I'm for the people. I'm against the government. Netanyahu is a war criminal. He's doing a genocide. He's got to go. The Truth Teller says, why Katie? I love what Katie Porter did when she was in the House. I think that she was great at communicating. Interesting way of pronouncing that. I think she was a great communicator. I think that she's got great policies. I haven't actually locked into any of her campaigning for governor. I am just still standing her from when she was in the House. Skippy says, why do you allow dual citizenship when virtually no other nation does? I have no idea, Skippy, and I'm not against changing that at all. Fog War Production says, RFK Jr. watching Donald Trump bite into his second stick of butter. That's very funny. All right. Sorry for Tomorrow says, the file should be a bipartisan issue. It should be, don't you think? Short says, how do you reconcile so many Israelis supporting G-side and the Iran war. I think that just like there are shitty Americans who support Donald Trump, I think that there are shitty Israelis who support Netanyahu. But I also think that there are really good Americans who have been tricked into supporting Trump and Republicans. I think there are probably a lot of really good Israelis who have been tricked into supporting Netanyahu and the rest of his far right wing coalition. See you later, Ecuadorian. Thanks for being here. Alrighty. Scrolling down. Scott Clower, thoughts on Joe Kent, the director of National Counterterrorism, resigning? I find that to be an extremely worrying thing because here's my read on that. This is a prediction. This is a guess. I'm not saying that this has been proven, but this is what I think. I think that Joe Kent is not being given the resources to protect Americans from domestic terrorist events. I think he's not being given the resources, and I believe that we are more under threat for domestic terrorism because of Trump's actions in Iran. And I do not believe that Joe Kent wants to get blamed for any terrorism that happens here in America. And so I believe that he resigned in order to not get blamed for that. That's my theory. Michael Safried says, capitalism or socialism? Why can't we have both like they have in Norway and Sweden and Scandinavia and Canada? AIPAC involvement in our country? ? I'm against it, but I'm against all billionaire-funded lobbying organizations. So I'm exactly as much against AIPAC as I am against Heritage and Federalist Society. That Romanian guy says, to be honest, both Iran and Israel should be blamed. Yeah, I generally agree with that. Iran's not a great government either. The Truth Teller says, I heard that Netanyahu is dead, supposedly. Honestly, I hope so. I mean, I don't know what kind of effect that would have on the people of Israel or even the war in that region. Dan says, you live in California? Yes, I do. Skippy says, what is the best country in the world? There is no best country in the world. Every country is equally amazing. That Romanian guy says, do you think the war is purposely prolonged that the billionaires can profit from oil price spikes? I do not believe that is the case. I believe that the war is partially to benefit the billionaire class. I don't think that they're going to prolong the war for that reason. I think they're going to prolong the war because it's going to be a fucking catastrophe that we are going to be completely incapable of extricating ourselves from. Sebastian says, what do you think the borders between Israel and Palestine should be? I don't know, but I don't think that Israel should treat Palestinians like second-class citizens. I think that they should have one area that's all theirs instead of being separated by like little slivers of Israel that have annexed Palestine. The number 3 says the trading of oil, not the price at the pump. Yeah, potentially. I don't know. Iowa Golfer says, why do Democrats support women having unnecessary abortions to the tune of $1 million a year? Iowa Golfer, Democrats support women having abortions and allowing them to decide which ones are necessary and which ones are unnecessary. I think it's a little misogynistic to claim that which abortions are necessary and unnecessary for women. Women, as far as I know, are not having abortions willy-nilly. Abortions can be emotionally traumatic for women. I guess the bigger question is, why do Republicans support women dying because of abortion bans that stop them from having medically necessary procedures? Iowa Golfer, let me know what you think about that. Skippy says, do you think Trump should do more about the fentanyl crisis? Yes, 100%. Where do you think it's coming from? I'm pretty sure it's coming from Mexico or China. I don't really remember. But yeah, he's not really doing anything about it. All right, Melly says, can you explain what's up with Israel and Palestine? I mean, that is a massive question, Melly. Short version is Israel is an extremely powerful country that wants to take over Palestine. Palestinians are fed up with it, and so they have put their fate in the hands of a terrorist organization called Hamas. Technically, Palestine is kind of like two countries right now, Gaza and the West Bank. And I believe Hamas is only in charge of Gaza, and the West Bank is being controlled by a government called the Palestinian Authority, which many people view as being wildly ineffective and basically, absent. Alrighty, Iowa Golfers says, according to the United States Obstetrics Association, 5% of abortions are necessary. Well, I don't know if that is accurate because I don't know you from Adam, Iowa Golfer. So again, why do Republicans support women dying when they could just get medical care, but are being denied that because of abortion bans in red states? Why do you support that, Iowa Golfer? Do you think it's better for pregnant women who are trying to have a baby dying because of ectopic pregnancies than a woman who can't afford to have a baby or was raped by somebody in their family being able to get an abortion. Let me know what you think about that. Melly says, why does the U.S. help Israel? There's a lot of different reasons why a specific politician might help Israel. The most good faith reason that I have been able to figure out is because Israel is very strategically located for America to run military operations in the Middle East. But there are a lot of other things to consider. There is the potential that politicians are being blackmailed by Israeli intelligence. There are Christian extremists in the Trump administration who believe that Israel needs to take over the Middle East to bring about the rapture. That's a real thing. That is a real thing. And we have this from multiple sources. People have gone out in front of the military and told them what you are doing in Iran is to bring about Armageddon so that the rapture can happen. And that should really fucking bother everybody. It should really fucking bother everybody that there are people in this Republican administration who believe in bringing about Armageddon so that the rapture can happen. That should stop you from voting for Republicans for at least a generation, in my opinion. Right, John Abbott says, if no other country allows dual citizenship, how do people have dual citizenship with those nations around the U.S.? That makes no sense. Tons of countries allow it. Thank you, John Abbott, for that clarification. I thought that was true, but I wasn't prepared. I wasn't prepared to make that case. All right, Dan says, what do we do about crime in the U.S.? My personal belief is that you solve crime in the U.S. by eliminating poverty. You solve crime in the U.S. by eliminating poverty and by going after white-collar criminals. I think you see crime, and particularly violent crime, plummet if you eliminate poverty and you focus on white-collar criminals. Lester Phil says, opinions on Tibet. I don't know nearly enough about Tibet to say anything about it. Turtle and a Half Shell says, trying to manipulate Jesus is wild. Don't know what that means. Michael Safried says, climate change or climate manipulation. Again, I don't really know what that means. That Romanian guy says, couldn't they just relocate Gazans in another area in the Middle East and reconstruct Gaza? So what you're describing, that Romanian guy, is called ethnic cleansing. And I know it sounds okay on paper, but every time that it has happened, it has been a fucking barbaric humanitarian catastrophe. Like, that's what the Trail of Tears was here in America. Everybody was like, well, why don't we just move the Native Americans to the West? You know, it's one of the most it's one of the most barbaric and universally condemned things in America's past. So yeah, taking everybody from one specific group and moving them somewhere else, it's always a bad idea. It is always a bad idea. Musking, Trail of Tears, long walk. Luke says, do you think immigrants who come to the U.S. illegally should be deported? Not necessarily. You know, with the way the law works is if you are poor, then we treat the law like this machine that cannot be altered whatsoever. You did this, you're going to jail. You did that, you're going to jail. 3 strikes, you're going to jail for a really long time, blah, blah, blah. But when rich and powerful people break the law, then we start treating the law like it's fungible. Like, whoa. Let's find out what the story is here. Like, maybe there were some mitigating circumstances for the reason why this person broke the law, you know? I think it should be the opposite. I think that when a poor person breaks the law, we should look at the mitigating circumstances because it is really difficult and mentally straining to be poor. And when a rich person breaks the law, then we should treat it like a button push, go to jail kind of a thing because you're rich. You can afford lawyers. You can afford people to tell you how to do this not illegally. So you not having knowledge of something is not an excuse. Alrighty, Eliminate All Forces' opinion on Zionist extremists. I think what you mean by Zionist extremists is people that believe Israel should take over all of the Middle East. And if that is what you mean by that, then I am against that. I am against Zionist extremists. Ms. Gonna be alright someday says most Israelis aren't even permanent residents. Make them move instead of the Palestinians. I mean, I don't think we should make anybody move. Alrighty, let's see here. Unless, like, you literally just, unless you're an Israeli settler who, like, this year kicked somebody out of their house, then you should not have to move. Maybe we'll give you like a 1 or 2 year window. Like, over the past 2 years, if you kicked a Palestinian out of their house, you got to give that house back. You know what? I think if you ever kicked a Palestinian out of their house, you need to fucking leave. I'm going to amend that situation. I'm going to amend that statement that I just made. Triska Muzking, thank you so much for helping me reach my 3rd gift goal of the day. That means it is time for finger hearts. It is finger hearts o'clock. Dan says, that's fair, but would you also agree Egypt should open their border for those who want to leave? I mean, that's a tough one. That really is a tough one. I don't know about that. Yeah, I gotta, if you send me a DM, Dan, I'll look a little bit more into that, but I don't have that information off the top of my fingers, unfortunately. Right, Callie Griffin says, if USA allows dual citizenship means the other countries does also. What is he talking about? Excellent question. Carl Lair says, we need a TV channel to brainwash people to be happy and nice. I don't know if we need to brainwash people for that. Maybe we could just convince them, or maybe like teach them the shit that you're supposed to learn in kindergarten, sharing and the like. D. Scott Muzking Triska, thank you so much for me reach my first finger hearts goal of the day. Okay. Jersey Rican says, do you support a 2-state solution versus Israel destroying Palestine? Oh, yeah, 100%. If you talk to experts on that region, though, they will tell you that a 2-state solution is logistically impossible right now, or virtually impossible right now. And so another solution needs to be thought of for the people of Palestine. That remaining, guys, is I was approving losing Gazans temporarily, but in practice, it could go very wrong. Sadly, 100% accurate. Triska Vaughn says, isn't there a book for that? A book for brainwash people to be happy and nice? Not sure what you mean by that. Melly says, where do you get your information from? Like, how do you educate yourself? I read a lot of nonfiction and I read the news pretty regularly. I'm an avid podcast listener, especially for things around news and politics. So yeah, if you want more specific recommendations, I recommend checking out my Discord. The Discord channel is a great resource for recommendations for books and podcasts, but also for nonprofit organizations that you should 100% be donating your money and time to. Ms. Gonna be all right someday says, I wouldn't want to share a state country with people who protest for the right to rape my people. I completely agree with that. Ms. is gonna be all right someday. Alrighty. D says, wouldn't an inheritance tax take away the self-made man lie of overtly wealthy children who have not earned it? I think that would be part of it, potentially. I mean, the children of the rich, even if they are not given any wealth from their parents, still have advantages. And so it is possible that they still do well after their parents pass away. So assuming, you were able to go to elite institutions and network with people at the highest levels of business and government, and then your dad passes away and leaves you nothing, you're still pretty well set up for success going forward. Vince says, do you genuinely believe the country can recover from where we're at now? Yes, 100%, Vince. What one person can do, another person can undo, and vice versa. All we need are good people to do the work, and we can get out of this. We can have a better country. We don't have to fucking live like this, where we're constantly worried about paying the rent or paying for food or paying for medical care or paying for college, being able to fucking get to work. Yeah, we don't have to live like this. We can have a responsible government that actually works for the people instead of just for the billionaire class. Instead of just for the Epstein class. Falling Box says, who do you listen to on the anti-establishment right? I don't listen to any right-wing commentators. Right-wing news organizations have been proven to be the least accurate. That remaining guy says, do you support progressive taxation at the same level as in the 1950s? Yes, 100%. Eliminate all voids says, sadly, we'll never have that since it's so hard for corruption not to happen. Here's the thing. If we replaced every Republican that is currently in government with a Democrat, we can change the laws to make corruption harder to do and harder to get away with. Philip Freiberg says, are you left or right? I am left. Melly says, oh my God, the zipping files were crazy. Why are we not revolting? That's what I'm doing. This is my version of revolting. Is I'm telling people, here's what you got to do. You got to strike. You got to protest. You got to boycott. You got to put pressure on politicians and businesses and billionaires. You got to talk to your neighbors. You got to join great groups that are already doing this work. Like the revolution is happening now. This is the revolution. I know that there are some people out there who want the revolution to be Molotov cocktails and breaking windows, but the revolution is currently happening. Like, fucking join us, guys. The water's great. We're doing the fucking work. Philip Freiberg. My name is Philip Freiberg. Did I not say Philip Freiberg? Or is it not? Or is it Freeberg? I don't know. Eliminate all Floyd says, nobody's revolting because if we revolt, we either win or we lose everything, and most people won't take the risk. Again, I think that what I'm doing is the revolution. Just because I'm not breaking things or throwing Molotov cocktails does not mean that this is not a revolt against the powerful. Me doing this live stream where I'm advocating for taxing the rich and not sending money and weapons to Israel, this is revolutionary, guys. Come on, join me. Let's fucking do some revolutionary shit together, guys. Thank you, Fun. I appreciate that. That remaining guy says, it's crazy how a basic right like housing is so expensive. The private market has failed us. Capitalism has failed us because housing, healthcare, education is prohibitively expensive. Capitalism, it is your job to make sure that people can afford to buy the things that they need. You have failed. So now we're going to give a little socialism and communism a try. Alrighty, Falling Boxes, I agree. Don't listen to the right-wing news organizations. They suck. Listen to individuals. Yeah, but I mean, Tucker Carlson's an individual. Like, I don't really buy his crap. Sorry for Tomorrow says, we're in a soft revolution. In my opinion, the midterms will determine how much farther the revolution goes. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know if I'd call it a soft revolution. Vince says, how do you believe this war between U.S. and Israel will end? I don't know how it's going to end, but I know that it's going to be a fucking catastrophe until it does, and potentially even after. Mio says, do you know you look like Dark Viper? I don't know who that is. Jersey Regan says, how many years do you think it will take to repair all of this dismantling that has happened? It depends on how many good people do the work, Jersey Regan. If lots of good people do the work, then we can get out of this lickety split. Apple U11 says, can I join? I don't think so. Tink says, you are doing what we should be doing, peaceful protest. Thank you, Tink. That remaining guy says, social democracy is the way. Look at the Nordics. I'm down with that. Eliminate all Foyt's opinion on global unity. I am for it. I am for unity. I'm for people getting together, doing shit, alliances, working together. That's how you do it, man. If you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. All right, everybody, we are at about an hour, so get your final questions in. If you want to support the show financially, you can, but you don't have to. I know that we are all struggling in this cost of living crisis that has been artificially created by Trump and the billionaire class. Morenita says, what do you think about Kamala? She's fine. Not my first choice, but she would have made a great president. Way better than Donald Trump, of course. Vince says, what state are you from? I was born and raised in California. I then went to college in Ohio. I then moved to Pennsylvania for a little bit. Then I lived in New York. Now I'm back in California. I also lived in the UK for a couple of months. So yeah, there's a bunch of ways that you can support the show financially. If you have the means and you have the desire, you can send bits on Twitch. You can send gifts on TikTok. You can become a super fan on TikTok. You can become a subscriber on Twitch. And if you have Amazon Prime, you can subscribe to my Twitch channel for free. It costs you $0, helps me out a ton. You can also join my Patreon for as little as $1 a month. Let's see here. That Romanian guy says, honestly, I hope somebody in 2028 will fix the U.S. economy and inequality. Me too. Melly says, do you think the president... Oh, hold on a second, that Romanian guy. It's not somebody. It's a group of people. One person is not going to be able to do that, but a bunch of individual people can. If a Democrat wins the presidency, but we don't have the House and the Senate, it is very much going to hamper how much progress we will be able to do. If Democrats get back the Congress, but they don't have a wide enough majority to get rid of the filibuster or pass things above the filibuster, that will greatly reduce how much we were able to get done. The way that we get progress is by getting massive majorities in government, both state, local, and federal. And the way that we get those majorities is by people like you and me doing the work and convincing people to get out there and vote for Democrats and those people need to get out there and convince other people to get out there and vote for Democrats, et cetera, et cetera. Alrighty, where was I? Falling Box says, you admit you don't listen to both sides. What else do you do to ensure you aren't in an echo chamber? Excellent question, Falling Box. So, as a person who consumes the news, I do get some information from right wing media because sometimes the mainstream media or progressive media reports on the things that they're saying on right wing media. So I do hear a little bit. The way that I ensure that I'm not in an echo chamber is I get my news from a bunch of different sources. I check out mainstream media, and I check out independent media, and I check out foreign media, and I check out legacy media, and I check out new media. You know, there's a there that is not one group of media. It is a bunch of different groups of media. The only thing that I am restricting is the one piece of media that I have figured out through research is wildly inaccurate and does not ever give me accurate information, or at least only 22% of the time. Saddlebrook Design says, I'll never vote for a Democrat. How come? Saddlebrook Designs. Do you not like it? Do you not like supporting the union? Do you not like clean air and clean water and taxing the rich? Melly says, what do you think of the education system? Needs work. Triple J says, only the brainwashed votes Emoker. I think you probably meant Democrats, but that is inaccurate. All right, that remaining guy says the two parties should cooperate and embrace their own views to create a common ground and not fight. I agree with that for the voters, but the Republican Party itself is broken. It is toxic. It is done. And until they start paying electoral consequences for all of the shit that they have done, they are never going to get less radical. They are never going to get less extreme. Alrighty, let's see here. If you have any questions that I was not able to get to on this live stream, DMs are open. I want you guys to reach out to me. I want you guys to hit me up. I want to be a resource for you guys to be more involved and informed about politics. So if there's any way that I can do that, use me until you use me up. DMs are open. You can email me through my website, or you can hit me up on my Discord. The Discord, of course, is also great because there are recommendations there for books and podcasts, and also nonprofit organizations that desperately need your help. Special shout out to all of my regular financial contributors: Muzz King, Pliff, Average Joe, It's the Rocketeer, the two Seans, D, Robert, Shannon, Carmine, and Patrick. And let's see here. What else we got here? D8 who says we could have had universal health care for the cost of this war. Accurate. Melly says, for real, how did we as a nation vote for Trump twice? Millionaire propaganda, Melly. Millionaire propaganda. Bubbles says, another bot account. Are you talking about me? I ain't a bot. I human. Mark Nichols says, will Congress be able to federalize elections? It is very, very unlikely that they will be able to federalize elections, Mark Nichols, because even the Republicans in Congress don't want to do that. It is only the most extreme psychopaths in the Republican Congress that want to do that. Most of them do not want to do that, and none of the Democrats want to do that. So it is very, very unlikely. Not impossible, though, and we should be worried about that, the fact that it's not impossible. Shadowcaster says, what do you think is the most effective type of government? What they have in Norway and Sweden and Scandinavia, etc. Alrighty, Vanessa says, what do you think of the Green Party in the UK? I don't know anything about it, but they seem okay from where I'm sitting. They might be a agent of the Russian government, the way that our Green Party is an agent of the Russian government in America. But I don't know. Right, that remaining guy says the U.S. is spending so much on healthcare only because they have to cover extreme profits of the corporations. That's partially true. Some of this is inflated healthcare costs at hospitals and shit, but yeah, generally speaking, 100%. Melly says, I just want to say thanks for putting this educational content on TikTok. Thank you, Melly. I appreciate it. And I appreciate everybody who helps me spread the word about what I'm trying to do here. I don't do this for clout. I don't do this for money. I do this because I want to help. And the more people that get this show, the more helping I believe that I can do. So please be part of the coalition of people that helps me grow this show so that I can get more people on board with the project of fixing this country. All right, everybody, I'm going to get out of here. do the work. That is the only way that we get out of this. Talk to people, convert people, convince people, recruit people, put political pressure on elected representatives, make your phone calls, visit their offices, do the work. That's the only way that we get out of this. The Democratic Party cannot do this by themselves. They do not have the political power or the resources. The billionaire class is always going to make sure the Republican Party can outspend them at every turn. So do the work, guys. Do the work. The good people need our help. So do the work. Max says, what party do you align with? The Democratic Party. T8 Who says dinosaur juice does not belong. I don't know what dinosaur juice is, T Who. I don't know what you're referring to here. Eliminated Floyd says top 10 experiences might be finding a Jarrett live for the first time. Oh, that's very sweet. That's really nice. So yeah, do the work. Be good to each other. You don't have to be a dick to other people to do the work. Be good to yourselves. Self-care is part of the work. I will see you guys tomorrow. Same bat time, same bat channel. Regular streaming schedule is Monday through Friday starting at 11:30 a.m. So I will see you guys then tomorrow. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye. Goodbye, 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 goodbye. Goodbye, 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 goodbye. Goodbye, 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 goodbye.